The bell over the diner door rang, and three men in dark suits walked in like they owned the place. I pushed my daughter's juice to the center of the table, stood up, and felt every eye in the room lock on me. They weren't here for food. They were here for the young waitress hiding behind the counter. And in that moment, I knew I was the only thing standing between her and them. Saturday mornings at Miller's Diner had a shape to them. The bell over the door, the hiss of the griddle, the window light laying a bright stripe across the tile floor. Jake and his daughter Emily slid into their usual booth by the pie case. He wrapped his hands around a chipped mug. She traced a finger along the fog on her orange juice glass and tried to guess the flavors of each pie by smell alone. Lily moved between tables with the easy rhythm of someone who knew where everything lived. Syrup here, clean mugs there, orders stacked by the register. She wore a plain name tag, a ponytail, and a smile that looked honest when it appeared and careful when it didn't. "Short stack for you," she said, setting Emily's plate down, then offered Jake his usual, 2 eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. Jake thanked her and watched how she checked the room the way a lifeguard checks water. Quick, constant, never dramatic. The suited men arrived after the rush, 3 of them at first, dark jackets too polished for this place. They took the corner booth and treated the laminated menu like a joke. Their laughter didn't match anything anyone said. It spread without a story, the kind that asks a room to agree. "Miss," one called when Lily passed. "We're deciding whether this is real maple syrup or the budget kind. Might need guidance." The grin that followed was not about syrup. Lily kept her voice even. "Kitchen buys grade A. If you'd like to try. We'd like you to try," another said, nudging the bottle toward the edge of the table with 2 fingers, his gaze fixed where it didn't belong. Across the aisle, a fork paused halfway to Emily's mouth. Jake lowered her hand gently and set the fork on the plate. "Eat," he said softly. "I've got it." Lily did what trained people do in rooms like this. Took 1 step back, made space, measured risk. "If you're ready to order, I can put it right in." "That depends," the first man said. "You new here?" "You look new." Jake felt the small changes, the cook's spatula slowing, the booth behind them going quiet, the faint tick of the wall clock growing louder because everything else hushed. He pictured exits, the distance to the counter, the weight of his wallet, the way a raised voice could turn a crowd either direction. "Coffee refill?" Lily asked, aiming past the comment as if it hadn't landed. "Sure, sweetheart," the third man said, angling his shoulder so she had to reach too close. The word turned the room colder. Jake met Lily's glance when she straightened. She didn't ask for help. She didn't have to. He saw the effort it cost her to keep her posture neutral, the way her fingers tightened around the coffee pot handle just once, then released. "Dad," Emily whispered, barely moving her lips. "They're being mean." "I know," he said. "We're going to be kind." His voice carried a calm he had chosen. At the corner booth, the men laughed again, louder now that they'd found an audience unwilling to look straight at them. One tapped the maple bottle against the table, thunk, thunk, as if knocking on a door only he had the right to open. Lily placed the pot on a tray and turned to step away. The first man let his hand drift, casual as a breeze, to the small of her back. The tray clicked down on the counter, too fast to be an accident. Lily didn't flinch, but her shoulders went still. Jake's chair made a deliberate sound against tile. He set his napkin beside the plate, slid Emily's juice further from the table's edge, and stood, not to make a scene, but because some moments are a line and the line had been crossed. He took a breath, felt the weight of the room tilt toward what came next, and turned toward the corner booth. The scrape of Jake's chair cut across the low music from the jukebox. He wasn't loud, but silence followed him the way a hush follows a clap of thunder. Every patron turned half an inch, just enough to see what he would do. Emily's fork rested on her plate, untouched now, as her wide eyes tracked her father's movement. Jake stepped forward, steady as if each motion were measured with a carpenter's level. He didn't clench his fists, he didn't need to. His presence was weight enough. "She said your coffee's hot and your order's waiting," he told the suited man, his voice low and even. "That's all she owes you." The first man leaned back in the booth, a smirk tightening at his mouth. "Who invited you, cowboy? We're just having a little fun." Jake let the words hang a second before answering. "Fun doesn't leave fingerprints." His eyes dropped to the man's hand, still half extended toward the space Lily had just vacated. The man withdrew it slowly, as if burned. The fry cook coughed into the silence. A spoon clinked against a saucer 2 booths away. No one spoke. Lily stood frozen by the counter, coffee pot in one hand, tray under the other arm. Her shoulders had locked stiff, but her eyes flicked toward Jake. Gratitude, fear, something in between. She didn't move closer, though. Experience told her attention could ricochet the wrong way. "You think you can walk in here and play sheriff?" the second man asked. He pushed his menu aside, trying for menace but sounding forced. The laminated sheet skidded uselessly across the formica table. Jake didn't look at him. He kept his focus steady, not daring a single blink that would surrender ground. "This place isn't yours to spoil," he said. "So finish your breakfast or take the door." For a long breath, the men seemed to weigh it. The laugh, the push, the swing that might test him. But something in the set of Jake's shoulders, or the small figure of Emily watching with her chin just above the table edge, shifted the calculus. The first man snorted and slid from the booth. The others followed, making sure their exit looked casual, but the pace of their strides betrayed them. The bell over the door rang twice as it closed behind them. The diner exhaled all at once, a sound like a deflating tire. Someone muttered, "About time." Another stirred sugar into coffee with too much force, trying to erase the tension. Jake returned to the booth, sat down, and pulled his napkin back into place. Emily leaned closer. "They left," she whispered, relief feathering her words. "They did," he agreed. His tone carried no triumph, just certainty, like the outcome had never been in doubt. Lily approached slowly, setting down the pot as though it were made of glass. Her voice was quiet, almost lost in the clatter of dishes returning to rhythm. "Thank you." It was all she could say, and even that cost her effort. Jake nodded once, not wanting to make her gratitude heavier than it already was. He lifted his mug for the refill she offered. The coffee streamed dark and steady, the only sound between them, and when she turned away again, he caught the faint tremor in her hand. Lily lingered near their booth after topping off the mug, as if pulled by a gravity she didn't want to admit. Jake noticed how she glanced at the door, then at the window, then at the counter clock, measuring time in nervous beats. When the room's hum rose again, cutlery, conversation, the sizzle from the grill, she leaned in, voice low enough that only Jake and Emily could hear. "They weren't here for pancakes," she said, words clipped, almost brittle. "They were here for me." Jake's brow furrowed. "You know them?" Lily's eyes darted toward the door again, then back. She hesitated, as if saying it out loud would conjure more trouble. Finally she whispered, "Victor Kane." Just the name. It landed like a lead weight between them. Jake let the name settle. He'd heard it before, anyone in town had. The tycoon with fingers in every deal. The man whose shadow stretched across boardrooms and streets alike. People didn't say his name in diners unless they wanted the air to thin. Jake's jaw tightened. "You're telling me you're connected to him?" Her nod was small, almost ashamed. "I'm his daughter." The syllables cracked like glass under pressure. "Not that you'd know it from this uniform. I came here to work, to breathe without bodyguards, to feel human. I thought maybe I could build a life without being owned." She exhaled through clenched teeth. "Guess I was wrong." Jake leaned back, processing, his gaze steady on hers. Emily blinked between them, sensing weight she couldn't yet measure. "So those men. Keepers," Lily interrupted. "Watchdogs, leashes, whatever you want to call them. They don't care if I serve coffee or wash dishes. To them, I'm property." His property. The bitterness in her voice was raw, unvarnished. "And the second I stop playing along, they come sniffing." The cook barked an order to the back, breaking the moment. Lily straightened, trying to mask the quake in her hands by gripping the tray tighter. But Jake caught it. He caught all of it, the years of rehearsed silence, the bruises invisible to the eye. "You stood up when no one else would," Lily said, meeting his eyes briefly. "But you shouldn't have. Not for me. It puts you, your daughter, in danger. They don't forgive. They don't forget." Jake glanced at Emily, who was busy cutting a pancake into uneven halves, blissfully unaware of the deeper current. He lowered his voice, calm but resolute. "Silence doesn't keep people safe. It just tells bullies the room belongs to them." His tone was steady, not heated, as if he were laying out a truth hammered long ago. Lily swallowed hard. Her lips trembled, but her chin lifted. "Then you don't know Victor Kane." "Maybe not," Jake said. But I know what happens when men like that think fear is all they need. And I don't scare easy. For the first time since she'd walked over, a flicker of something softer crossed Lily's face. Not relief exactly, but the outline of it, the shadow of trust daring to form. She pulled back, straightening her apron, and whispered, "Then you'd better be ready." The bell over the diner door rang again, this time heavier. The chime above the diner door sliced through Lily's last words. This time, the sound carried weight, like the scrape of steel on stone. Heads turned instinctively, eyes flicking toward the entrance before quickly retreating back to coffee cups and folded menus. 3 men stepped inside, dark suits, no pretense of casual breakfast seekers. Their shoes clicked too sharp against the worn linoleum. Each step measured, claiming space without asking. Jake shifted in his booth seat before they'd even fully crossed the threshold. He didn't rush, he didn't need to. He straightened his back, turned slightly, and placed one arm along the edge of the table, a wall between Emily and the room. His other hand rested lightly on the table's surface, palm open, casual only on the surface. Emily felt the change and pressed closer into the booth corner, her fork abandoned on the plate. Lily froze mid-step near the counter. Her fingers tightened on the tray she was carrying until the knuckles went white. She set it down with care, though the plates rattled faintly, betraying her nerves. Her eyes darted to Jake, wide and unshielded now, as if silently asking, "Will you still stand if it gets worse?" The tallest of the 3 scanned the diner, gaze sweeping over the fry cook, the elderly couple by the window, then locking on Lily. He didn't smile. "You've been busy," he said, voice low and smooth, like oil spread on water. He took another step closer. The other 2 flanked him, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. They weren't here to eat. They were here to retrieve. Jake pushed his coffee mug slightly forward, freeing space in front of him, and stood. Not fast, not theatrical, just rising into his full height, one slow breath at a time, until he was between the men and the counter where Lily stood rooted. His frame was solid, not imposing like theirs, but immovable. A man who'd worked with his hands long enough to know exactly where his strength lived. "Table's full," Jake said quietly, nodding toward the empty booths along the wall. "You'll want to sit elsewhere." The second man chuckled under his breath, the sound brittle, a glass about to crack. "We're not here to sit." The diner's hum faded again. Coffee cups stopped midway to lips. The fry cook's spatula stilled above the griddle. Even the jukebox seemed to hesitate between songs. Jake felt the eyes on his back, the weight of a dozen witnesses balancing their own fear against curiosity. No one was going to help. No one ever did. Emily's small hand tugged at the edge of his shirt. "Dad?" she whispered, the question hidden in the single word. Jake rested his hand briefly on her shoulder without turning his gaze from the men. "It's all right," he said, steady as stone. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. What mattered was that she believed him. Lily exhaled shakily, barely audible, as if she'd been holding her breath since the bell rang. She stepped closer, just enough that her presence reached him, but not enough to draw the men's attention. Her whisper was a thread only he could catch. "Don't do this. Please." Jake didn't answer her. Not yet. His eyes stayed on the intruders, his posture saying what his words hadn't, that they'd have to go through him first. The tall man let the silence stretch, as if daring Jake to blink first. His jaw flexed once. Then he spoke the words everyone else in the room had been avoiding. "Victor Kane wants his daughter back." The name landed like a gavel. The diner seemed to shrink around it. Forks froze, coffee cooled untouched, conversations withered mid-sentence. Even the fry cook muttered something under his breath and turned the spatula flat on the griddle, as though bracing for a storm. Jake didn't move. He let the weight of the name settle against him and refused to flinch. Instead, he asked with a calm that was more dangerous than shouting, "Is that what she is to you? A thing you fetch? Like property?" The second man sneered. "You don't understand who you're protecting." His eyes cut toward Lily, sharp as glass. "She's not supposed to be here. Not supposed to be anyone's waitress. She's Kane's blood, and blood doesn't get to hide." Lily drew in a shaky breath, her voice finally breaking the stillness. "I'm not his. Not anymore." Her tone trembled, but the words carried a steel edge. "I'm not something to be owned. I'm not a business deal. I'm a person." She took one step forward, apron trembling at her waist. chin lifted in defiance that looked fragile but held firm. Jake shifted slightly, enough to block the men's line of sight to her. She said no, he stated flatly. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the diner like the strike of a hammer. That should be enough. The leader tilted his head, studying Jake the way a wolf studies a fence it might test. Do you have any idea who you're standing against? Victor Kane doesn't hear no. He doesn't lose. He doesn't walk away. Jake's eyes didn't waver. Then maybe it's time someone showed him how. There was no bravado in it, no raised voice, just an anchored certainty. His hands hung loose at his sides, but the steadiness of his stance spoke louder than fists ever could. The tension rippled outward. Patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unwilling to move but unable to stay still. Some avoided eye contact, while others risked quick glances, testing if courage might be contagious. The old clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had. For the first time, the men seemed unsure. The tall one's nostrils flared, his confidence checked by the quiet refusal staring him down. Lily's breath shook out, a single exhale, like she'd been waiting years for someone to stand in that space with her. Emily, pressed into the corner of the booth, studied her father's profile, the calm jawline, the unshaken gaze, and whispered so softly only he could hear. Don't let them take her, Dad. Jake's answer came not in words, but in the way he squared his shoulders, his silence speaking louder than any promise. The standoff stretched until it felt like the air itself might snap. The three men loomed near the counter, Jake holding his ground between them and Lily, who hovered just behind him with her hands clenched at her apron. Every patron sat trapped in the silence, unwilling to move, unwilling to breathe too loudly. Even the fry cook's hand trembled slightly as grease hissed against iron. Then a sound broke it, not from Jake, not from the men, but from Emily. Her small voice carried with startling clarity, higher than the low rumble of adult fear. "Why are you being mean to her?" she asked, her words ringing into the space like a bell. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Every syllable was coded in innocence too honest to ignore. Heads turned. A few diners flinched at the sudden exposure of truth. The leader of the suited men blinked, momentarily disarmed, as if no one had ever asked him that question before. He started to sneer, then stopped when he noticed half the room watching him differently now, not with fear, but with quiet judgment. Emily slid out from the booth seat just far enough to clutch Jake's hand. "She's nice. She brought me pancakes." Her eyes, wide and unflinching, fixed on the tall man. "You should leave her alone." The words settled heavier than Jake's defiance. They cut through bravado, stripping the moment bare. The second man shifted his weight, uncomfortable under the weight of the room's shifting mood. The third muttered something under his breath, eyes darting to the window as though measuring escape. Jake's hand squeezed Emily's once before releasing. He faced the men with renewed steadiness. "You heard her." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The child's question had tilted the balance. What sounded like defiance before now felt like truth no one in the room could deny. The leader's lips thinned. He drew in a breath and exhaled slowly, frustration flickering across his face. "This isn't over," he said, voice low but edged with threat. He stepped back, and the other two followed. Their retreat was deliberate, meant to look like choice rather than concession, but the pace betrayed urgency. The bell over the door rang as they left, its jingle oddly fragile after the storm they'd carried in. The diner remained still, every eye tracking the men until the glass stopped vibrating in the frame. Then, slowly, the world began to move again. Forks clinking, coffee poured, whispers rising like cautious rain. Jake stayed standing until the last shadow slipped beyond the window. Only then did he sit, the weight of the moment pressing against his shoulders. Emily climbed back onto the booth seat beside him, nestling against his arm. Lily hadn't moved. She pressed a hand to her lips, her breath trembling. Her eyes were glossy, not just from fear but from something else, astonishment, maybe, at what had just unfolded. For the first time, she looked less like a fugitive and more like someone who had been given a reason to believe in safety, however temporary. When the door finally shut behind the suited men, a fragile quiet settled over the diner, the kind of silence that isn't peace but the echo after thunder. Patrons bent low over their plates, pretending to eat, while stealing glances at Lily and Jake. The fry cook banged a pan onto the stove a little too loudly, as if noise could scrub away what had just happened. Lily stayed rooted by the counter, her hand still pressed near her mouth. It took her a long moment to move, and when she did, it was only to walk slowly back toward Jake's booth. Her steps were careful, as if the floor might give way. She stopped at the edge of the table, not trusting her voice at first. Finally, she whispered, "Why did you do that? You didn't have to. You don't even know me." Jake lifted his eyes from his coffee, steady and calm. Because what they were doing was wrong. He paused, letting the words hang in the air before adding, "And sometimes the world doesn't change unless somebody says no." Her breath caught. She shook her head, strands of hair falling loose from her ponytail. "You don't understand. You've made yourself a target. They won't just forget. Victor Kane, he'll hear about this. He hears about everything." Her voice cracked on the last word, the certainty in it chilling. Jake leaned back, folding his arms, his expression unreadable but firm. "I'm not interested in their memory. I'm interested in my daughter growing up knowing that silence isn't strength." He glanced at Emily, who was busy cutting her pancakes again as if the world had already righted itself. "I want her to see what it looks like when people stand up instead of look away." Lily's eyes filled, though she blinked quickly to keep the tears from falling. "But it was me. It was my mess. I should have handled it." "You were handling it," Jake said. His voice softened, but the steel remained underneath. "Sometimes handling it means not letting yourself be cornered alone. Sometimes it means letting someone else take a step with you." Her lips trembled as she lowered her gaze to the floor. For years she had been taught her place, told that defiance only made the cage tighter. Yet here was a stranger, not family, not ally, not anyone tied to Victor's empire, who stood without hesitation. The gratitude burned too hot for her to contain, and one tear finally slid down her cheek before she brushed it away quickly. "You've made a dangerous choice," she murmured. "For her sake, for Emily's, you should have walked away." Jake's hand rested briefly on the table, palm open, steady as stone. "For her sake, I couldn't." The words landed with a weight Lily couldn't argue against. She pressed her tray tighter to her chest, as if it might hold her together, and whispered, "Then you're braver than you should be." The diner returned to its rhythm in hesitant fragments. Coffee poured, silverware clinked, the jukebox hummed faintly in the background, but the air still carried the residue of what had passed. Lily slid into the booth across from Jake and Emily, her hands twisting the edge of her apron as if she needed the fabric to anchor her. She kept her voice low, meant only for them. "You don't understand what happens next. They'll come again. They always do." Jake regarded her quietly, his shoulders broad, his posture unshaken. "Then we'll be here again," he said. No bravado, no flourish, just simple truth. His words weren't a promise he couldn't keep. They were a line drawn in calm resolve. Emily leaned into his side, her small hand resting on his arm as if to second the statement. Lily searched his face, trying to find the crack where fear should be. "You can't fight Victor Kane," she whispered, her throat tight. "No one can. He doesn't just control businesses. He controls people. He controls futures." Her eyes shimmered, but she blinked the tears back, unwilling to let them fall where the room might see. Jake leaned forward slightly, forearms on the table, steady as stone. "Maybe so," he said, "but he doesn't control you. Not here. Not now." He let the words sit, the weight of them quiet but undeniable. "And he doesn't get to teach my daughter that people can be owned." For a moment, Lily's breath caught, as if she hadn't heard that truth spoken aloud before. The edges of her composure softened, her mask cracking enough to show the exhausted young woman beneath the name tag and apron. "I've been running for so long," she confessed, voice breaking. "I thought if I kept moving, kept hiding, maybe I could disappear. But today," she stopped, her eyes closing briefly. "Today I feel seen, and that terrifies me more than disappearing ever did." Jake reached across the table, his hand broad, palm up, not demanding but offering. Lily stared at it, trembling, then placed her own lightly in his. The contact was tentative, fragile, yet steady. The kind of connection that said, "I'm not asking for forever, just for this moment to not be alone." Emily looked between them with the clear eyes of a child who understood more than she could put into words. "Then we'll sit together," she said softly, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. Lily let out a shaky laugh that caught on her tears. She squeezed Jake's hand once, tightly, then released it, glancing toward the door as though expecting the bell to ring again at any moment. "He won't stop," she warned. Jake leaned back, his voice steady. "Then neither will we." The diner around them stirred back to life. But at that table, something had shifted. No longer just a father and daughter eating pancakes, no longer just a waitress serving coffee, but three people bound in a fragile beginning, braced against the storm that would surely come.